All right, how you doing, everyone? I'm Russ Salzberg, and welcome to Big Blue Kickoff Live here. Today brought to you by Pepsi Zero Sugar, new and improved. Zero never tasted so good. With me, as always, my colleague and good buddy, Paulie Dots, Paul Dottino, at the controls, Pearson Butler, and, of course, you, the people out there, because without you, the people out there, we'd have nobody in here to be talking to. As always, the number is 201. 939-4513. That's 201-939-4513. For me, this is our wrap-up show to the season, which was a very, very fun season. Fun season, but as they say, not just in this business, all good things must come to an end. And unfortunately, the Giants' season not only came to an end, it came to a thud in Philadelphia. But, I was glad to hear Joe Schoen, as you were there with me on Monday, when he addressed the media, and he said it. And as I was watching the game Saturday night, I was feeling the same thing. Schoen said it. There is a talent gap between the Giants and the Eagles. We've made great strides this season. We've got to continue to make strides. But there's a reason, whether you or I or Paul or Pearson or anybody likes the Eagles or dislikes the Eagles, there's a reason they were the number one seed.
No doubt. And there's a reason why San Fran was the number 2 seed.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
Because both of those teams are far better than anybody else in the NFC. And you know the truth here, folks. There are 7 playoff bids in each conference. And so any team that made the playoffs doesn't have to apologize because they earned it and they belong. And so the Giants can hold their heads high. They not only made the playoffs, but they won a playoff game on the road against the number 3 seed and then had what happened in the second round. There's nothing wrong with that. That's the way the rules work. 7 playoff teams in each conference. So the Giants can very, very proudly say they were one of the top 8 teams to survive.
You might disagree with me. I don't know if you and I ever really discussed this. We've discussed so many things, and the fans might disagree, but I've always maintained this. The hardest thing to do, I'm talking about the NFL now, the hardest thing to do, remember, I'm talking about 17 games. The hardest thing to do is get through those 17 games to get into, as Bill Parcells would always say, to get into the tournament.
Right.
That is the big accomplishment. That's the toughest thing. Once you get into the tournament, then everything's got to fall into place, a little bit of luck too, and things can happen. But then it's when for some teams, it's 4 games. For a team like the Eagles or the Kansas City Chiefs, it would be winning 3 games. To me, getting into the postseason is it's a marathon. It's a much more difficult task. In the postseason, it's like, okay, you take your punches, get a little bit of luck, see if things work out.
Look, there have been more than a handful of teams over the years since they instituted the wild card back in 1970 that won double digits and did not make it.
Right.
It happened to Tom Coughlin's Giants one year. They won 10 games and did not make the playoffs.
Right.
So really what it comes down to is whatever the circumstances are during the course of that season, if you do enough to earn your way in, it is an accomplishment. It's just that simple. There's no other way to describe it.
I couldn't agree with you more. And I'm going to tell you something else. Paul and I were just discussing it. I've been tweeting it out the last couple of days. I did it again today. Folks, and I use the analogy to Aaron Judge. What happened when the Yankees season ended? When the Yankee season ended in October, everybody was banging the drums. It was ad nauseum. What's going to happen? Where is he going to go? Who's he going to sign with? People were ready to jump off bridges and roofs and every place else. And you know what? Where is Aaron Judge today? He's with the Yankees, and he's the Yankees captain. Folks, Daniel Jones, Saquon Barkley, it's the same kind of situation. It's all about posturing. It's strictly business. They ain't going anyplace. take it to the bank. Both will be wearing Giant uniforms next season. Period. End of story. And I get people need to write, people need to talk, people look for angles on stories. That's all fine. But listen, I was in that Giants locker room as you were, a closing day, a cleanup day on Sunday. And the questions, one after another, to Daniel and to Saquon. And, are you going to be here? Do you want to be here? Have they said anything to you? To Daniel, do you know what other quarterbacks are making? They're not going to tip their hands, nor should they tip their hands. Their agents tell them not to tip their hands. Just the same way throughout the season. When they asked, somebody would ask Brian Daboll, what'd you think of Daniel today? He was good. Had a good game. Not wow, he was great. He was the king. That's business. Joe Schoen made it very clear on Monday. It's good. We're going to have him back. That's it. What's the number? Well, we'll talk about that because that's business. That's the business of, as in The Godfather. This is the business we've chosen. So I always say this also. When it comes to this kind of business, there are no black hats and there are no white hats. No one's the good guy, no one's the bad guy. Now, you might not like it, like if it's your team and you want your guy to be here, that's fine, but that's business. I'm not going to criticize anybody for that, but that ain't happening here. Saquon Barkley, Daniel Jones are Giants now. They will be Giants tomorrow and for many more tomorrows after that.
We know what's just going to get done. We just have to cut through the red tape, that's all. That's all.
Is that the poor man's Godfather?
Do you want to play the pasta while we're here? It's okay. We got this under control.
Pearson.
It's the Podfather.
The Podfather. Very, very good. Oh, I'm going to talk to somebody. You got to get a raise for that one. That's your new name, the Podfather.
Oh, my goodness.
Oh, boy, oh, boy. 201-939-4513 is the number. 201-939-4513. Let's take care of a little business before we open up the phone lines. Giants fans, make sure you go subscribe to Giants Huddle, the Giants Huddle podcast, the podcast featuring a rapid reaction right after each game with one of our analysts. Of course, you got to wait till next season. An episode midweek, which features an interview with the national analyst, and then a game preview featuring a long-form interview with a current Giants player, an exclusive sit-down with Bob Papa and head coach Brian Daboll, and an opponent preview of that week's opponent. Search for Giants Huddle on your favorite podcast platform or listen to the Giants app or at giants.com/podcasts. And go ahead.
Oh, you got another promo?
No, I was going to go to open up our phone line.
Okay, before we do that, we should just mention a little bit of news. Saquon Barkley been nominated as NFL Comeback Player of the Year, which is really cool because he'd been telling people all along, hey, let me get healthy and we'll see what happens. And he did. He was outstanding. And also Brian Daboll, nominated for NFL Coach of the Year. The guys going up against Barkley are Christian McCaffrey and Geno Smith. Believe it or not,
I know you're going to agree with me. There's a name that was left out.
Nick Gates is the guy. He's the runaway winner.
I love Saquon, but Nick Gates, nobody.
No doubt.
Nobody. I mean, Nick Gates' leg last season was shattered, busted, infection setting in. I don't know how many surgeries he went through. There's a question, was he ever going to play again?
The award's a joke.
Yeah,
that they did not nominate Nick Gates and Brian Robinson from the Commanders, who had gotten shot.
He wasn't nominated?
No.
Oh, my gosh.
These are the three, McCaffrey, Barkley, and Geno Smith. How Geno Smith gets on this list, I have absolutely no idea.
Well, Geno gets on because, from no place to, back where he is. But that's not a comeback player.
To come back, you had to be something first. Right. Geno Smith is and never was.
Right. Well,
Come on.
No, I'm not going to say that.
All right, whatever. Bottom line is Nick Gates and Brian Robinson are easily the only two guys who should be nominated for this award.
I mean, Nick Gates.
The medical circumstances. Come on.
We didn't know if he was going to have a career again. We didn't know if he was going to walk properly again. And there he was in the middle of the season, a vital cog on the offensive line. That, to me, and I'm taking nothing away from any of the other guys, but I'm sorry. And I'll tell you what, as sure as you and I are sitting here, and as sure as you and I both know Saquon Barkley would agree on Nick
There's
Gates.
no doubt in my mind.
Not, 1,000%.
Nick Gates is one of the most beloved teammates in that locker room because of everything that he went through. And not just that, but what a quality guy.
A quality guy. And when you want to talk about toughness, I can tell you this, folks, and there's a lot of big men in that locker room. It's unanimous.
Yes.
And it's not just amongst us, it's amongst the players. If you need to get into a barroom fight or a back alley brawl, the one giant you want with you is Mr. 65, Nick Gates. Period.
All
But a
right.
beep, but a bop, but a boop.
The other nominees for Coach of the Year, Sean McDermott from Buffalo, Doug Peterson from Jacksonville, San Francisco's Kyle Shanahan, and Philadelphia's Nick Sirianni. They're also in the mix with Daboll as the NFL Coach of the Year.
Well, I can't argue with anybody. I mean, I'm totally biased. I get it.
I know.
Because we lived through it with the Giants, and we know what has been turned around. Peterson has done a tremendous job with
Jacksonville.
Jacksonville.
No doubt.
I'll tell you.
No doubt.
I'll tell you another coach who's done a tremendous job. Dan Campbell.
Yes.
Dan Campbell's
Yes.
done a tremendous job.
And
with
that's the
Lions.
problem with this particular vote because there are so many worthy guys.
Yeah.
It's not obvious. You could split this vote
Yeah.
like 6 different ways.
Yeah, that's a tough one. But
The other one, Gates and Peterson.
that doesn't.
Robinson, Gates and Robinson. Oh, they're the only two people who should have even been on the list.
You're right.
It's not even fun.
Anyway, let's open up the lines. 201-939-4513 is the number. Let's go to our dear friend in Delaware, Coach Marvin. Hey, Coach, how we doing today?
Doing good, Russ. How you doing?
I'm doing okay, all things considered.
How's the Podfather doing?
The Podfather is, he's kind of a little mellow this past week, but we're getting through it. As I said, as you heard me say, all good things must end. It was a very good season. Listen, I'll tell you what. When I saw Brian Daboll, I said to him, "Hey, head high." In fact, I said head bleeping high because you don't let a bad ending spoil a very good season. The Giants accomplished a lot. You as a coach accomplished a lot, so we move forward and get ready for next season.
Yeah, Coach Marvin. Too much excitement and too much promise outweighing the disappointment of the finale. And that's just the only way to look at it.
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, I've been in those situations where, my team, I had a team that finished number 2 in the state, and we was undefeated going into that game. And we got blown out. My thing was, it's going to hurt when you lose a game like that, regardless if you supposed to be there or not be there. The only thing I can tell them is it's going to hurt, and the only time you're going to feel okay about it, it may take a week or so, it may take a month, but when you look back, you'll realize, you know what, we had a good season, we had a good time in that season. So sometimes it takes a while when you lose a game like that for you to really come back to earth and realize what happened. It's hard to tell players that, you hold your head up, and it's easy to say, hard to do. And I understand that, you're running, the game's going to keep running through their heads over and over again. But that's just the way, that's what comes when you lose in big games. And that was a big game. And I told y'all last week, this is a different beast. And they were definitely a beast.
Yeah.
The game plan, I thought the game plan, it is what it is. I'm not going to criticize. I don't like criticizing those types of things of what coaches are doing because they're in the room. But my thing, I think Russ asked me about a week ago before the Minnesota game, he asked me about trick plays. And I said that trick plays are where you're trying to get guys' eyes looking in one direction and their feet standing still. This triple option had their feet standing still. My girlfriend's daughter was here. She was just learning the football game. She became a Giant fan. She said something that I was thinking that was true. She said, "Wow, the Eagles are fast." And I say, well, in my head, I'm saying, well, we may just be slow, but they were fast that night.
Mm-hmm.
And the other thing she said is, it was like they didn't know what to do. The Giants didn't know what to do, and that was because their feet were standing still. And the way this triple option worked is almost like the old days of the wishbone or the wing tee. And the way we used to have to stop it back at the time, early my years in coaching, I figured the only way I can stop it, if we stand and wait for them to make their move, we're going to be standing still. They're going to be hitting the edges, getting to the outside, side to side, hitting. We looking for them in one direction, they going in another. So I started thinking the best thing we have to do is attack the head of a wishbone or the wing tee, and that's the quarterback. And I see they let the defensive end or the edge rusher free, and he has to read. He got to figure out which one's going to get the ball. So
That's
the
right.
quarterback is reading him. So my thing is all-out speed directly at the quarterback. Now, I may need your help on this one. I may need you guys' help on this one. Is that when the quarterback puts the ball in the arms of the running back, and he gives it to the running back. From what I remember, he loses his protection.
That's correct. You can hit him
far
as
as
long as
hitting
it's not too late. It's got to be quick enough, and you can plaster him. And I have said for years since RG3 came into this league, that's what I would tell my defense every time: make that quarterback pay for that handoff every single time. I agree with you.
He must pay for that
Absolutely.
every time.
Absolutely.
Even if he's throwing the ball out of that, he must not see that pass completed.
I agree with you. But, Coach,
And
to
I
be
think
frank
that
with
will
you,
pull them out of it.
yeah, but you know what, Coach? This wasn't about scheme. This was about the Giants being outclassed by a roster that was just far better.
Far
And the
superior.
truth of the matter is, the Eagles' offensive line just had their way. I mean, they were blocking and knocking guys left and right and on their backs and opening up holes the size of the Grand Canyon. This was a mauling job by Philly's O-line.
You know what, Coach Marv? As I was watching the game, and I know you've been waiting to get on, so you heard what Paul and I were talking about with comeback player and coach of the year. As I was watching the game, I said to myself, this is the very reason why Brian Daboll, to me, is coach of the year, because I do believe the Giants overachieved. I do believe they played, for lack of a better term, their asses off week in and week out. I think Coach Brian Daboll was responsible for that. And because as I'm watching that, as Paul just said, the talent gap was significant between those teams.
Yes.
Yet they competed and won. They didn't win. They won 9 games in the regular season, plus a very big playoff game in the postseason.
Right.
So that, to me, that's what I got out of that game. I got out of that game what many of us said. I mean, listen, Paulie, were you and I not talking about all season? He had backups for receivers. I mean, come on.
Yeah.
So it was different.
I think my separation between the two, and Peterson, he did a great job with Jacksonville. But Jacksonville wasn't playing in the same division we were playing.
No,
Amen to
not
that.
at all. Not at all.
We had Philly, and Washington was fighting to the last week to get in the playoff. So we were in a battle every week we were playing. But if you look at their division, the teams that were in their division, they kind of came back towards Jacksonville. We were moving forward towards Philly and Dallas. So I think that's the difference. In my opinion, that's the difference. That's why I like Daboll, because he was playing in a tougher division.
Yeah.
You guys were talking about Geno is being looked at as comeback player of the year. I think Geno should be in the most improved player of the year, which
There
he
you
won't
go.
win. it'll be Hurst that would win that.
Right. I would agree with
so
that.
I think he should be in. I think he should be in that group rather than
That's a fair point.
comeback player.
By the way, Coach,
And as far-
I would go with Jefferson, the Vikings receiver, as the MVP, because without him, I don't think Minnesota gets that third seed.
Right. No, he was outstanding.
Unbelievable.
He was outstanding
Huge difference
this year.
maker.
And with the Gates situation, Paul, offensive linemen are not going to win any award.
I know.
They're not. College, they can't even get into the Heisman.
Oh, no.
Because of
Offensive
the way it's
lineman.
all rigged.
Right.
Yeah, so they're not going to be an MVPs. They're not going to be because everybody's measuring yards rather than production.
Yeah, but you
And-
know what, Coach? When it comes to Nick Gates, you can't measure what he did. You
Right.
can't, where he was to what he did to where he is today. I mean, just from a guy being in a locker room, and I know Paul agrees because you heard Paul speak so passionately about him. I mean, to watch what he's been through, to be there through all this and watch what he's been through. I mean, I'm dumbfounded that he's not in the discussion for comeback player of the year. Just crazy. But listen, Coach Marv, it's always a pleasure,
right, guys.
buddy. Be
Talk
well.
soon.
Look
All
forward
right,
to
guys.
talking
Y'all
to you
take
again.
care.
You too. Bye-bye. 201-939-4513. That really, I don't get that at all. That makes no sense to me. Somebody's not thinking, or if they're not thinking,
Oh, it's
then
obvious, Russ.
then someone's lazy and not doing their homework.
They're just interested in getting some popular names out there
Yeah,
on the votes. That's all.
that's what it
They,
is.
They, nobody, whoever put together that list did not pay attention
No.
to what was going on in this league. They simply took names out of a hat, and these guys are big headliners. Okay,
I agree.
everybody knows those guys. We'll put them up for it.
I couldn't agree with you more. 201-939-4513 is the number. Let's just take care of a little business before we get back to the phone lines. Giant fans, take your fandom to the next level with a season ticket membership. And there's a lot to look forward to. Stay connected to the club all year round, not just on game days. Memberships are now available for the 2023 season. To learn more about all the exclusive member benefits, visit giants.com/tickets. Limited inventory is available. All right, back to the phone lines we go, 201-939-4513. To Glen Falls it is, and let's check in with Doug. Hello, Doug. You're on with Russ and Paul.
Hi.
Hi.
I want to talk about Danny Dimes and a couple things that were very telling in what Joe Schoen said. And did you know that Pat Shurmur is possibly going to be the offensive coordinator for the Washington Commanders? And I guess he made a statement if he gets that job, he wants the Commanders to come after Danny Dimes. But the other big thing is that like Joe Schoen said.
Well, hold on a second, Doug.
Okay.
And if you would want Danny Dimes, as Paul just said, so what about it?
You know how many teams right now would love to get their hands on Daniel Jones? Seriously.
Well, I
He's
guess what
really
my
good, in
point
case
was
you didn't
then-
watch. He's a really good quarterback.
Now, Doug, first off, turn off the radio in the background, please. Okay? Hello?
Say again.
I said turn off the radio in the background.
I don't have a radio on.
All right. Go ahead.
ahead.
I'm sorry. Your other point. Your point is that Jones would have suitors if he hits the market, and I agree with that. There would be suitors. I don't think he's going to hit the market. Go ahead.
All right.
Yeah,
Doug,
I don't think he will because
Okay, Doug.
of what Joe
Doug.
Schoen said.
Yeah, he's not going to hit the market. Thank you for the call, Doug. Don't tell me that you don't have a radio on in the background. What am I hearing?
I
My
think he
favorite
was
Martian?
taking you literally. His computer was on, and he was taking you
okay.
literally.
All right.
I think that's the problem.
First of all, let me tell you something about Pat Shurmur. All right, and I have great respect for Pat. Good man.
He was a big Jones fan from the get-go.
Big Jones fan. When Pat Sherman knew, and I told this to you, when Pat Sherman knew the writing was on the wall for him, Pat Sherman said to me, Russ, in a few years, everybody's going to be envious of the Giants for having a combination of quarterback, running back in Daniel and Saquon, two young guys who are going to be terrific. Two young guys who are going to be terrific. So Sherman was right about that. I also remember when the draft was taken when the draft was going on, and Daniel was picked. I remember watching the guys. I'll say it right now, watching the guys on ESPN, and I remember Ryan Clark sitting there going, "Did you see the look on Pat Shermer's face? He wanted no part of Daniel Jones." I'm paraphrasing, but he said with that angry look, and I'm like, really? Like, you know what the hell you're talking about? I mean, folks, stuff like that pisses me off because it's flat out, you're judging, you took a look at somebody. I mean, it's stupid. But on the same issue, I do not think Pat Shermer, if he was going to become an offensive coordinator for the Commanders, Pat's smart enough not to say, this is who I want. He would leave that up to the head coach and general manager to say,
I'm
this
sure
is
he
who
would.
we want.
There's such a thing as tampering until the guy gets to be free anyway.
And
So, we shouldn't even bother acknowledging that.
Pat is far too smart for that. So
The point does remain, though, that if Jones were to hit free agency, he would have a number of suitors. Again, we don't believe that's going to happen.
as I said to start the show, take it to the bank, bet the house on it. Daniel Jones, Saquon Barkley, Giants.
There you go.
Now, tomorrow, and for a lot of tomorrows after. 201-939-4513 is the number. Let's go to our friend Hugo in Jersey here. Hello, Hugo.
Good afternoon, guys.
Hi.
At the risk of dating myself, I should let you guys know that I've been a Giant fan since 1978, so right before Ray Perkins took over. And, you know, when the season ends, I become a little bit reflective on our current situation, and I look back to history a little bit to maybe provide some guidance. And one of the things I really struggle with is what we're going to do with Saquon Barkley. Now, I'm going to use a historical reference here. From 2004 to 2006, Tiki Barber had really Hall of Fame level years, both as a runner and a receiver. And going to the 2007 season, people were very down on the Giants because, you know, they used to put up a pie chart of what percentage of our offense Tiki accounted for when you used to watch games on TV. And it was almost assumed like all that production would go away. Well, lo and behold, in 2007, a guy named Jacobs, a guy named Bradshaw, a guy named Ward, a guy named Reuben Drones gave us a pretty good running game. And in 2008, the following year, was probably our best running game that I've ever witnessed with the Earth, Wind, and Fire combination. So I am more focused on the running game as opposed to the running back. Now, obviously, the other thing about running backs is you can really get first-round value for a running back in the second and third rounds. Like, for example, last year when the Jets drafted the running back in the second round,
Brees Hall,
who unfortunately got hurt, I said, wow, that's real value there. So, you know, you got, and I hate to say because I love Saquon, I know you guys do too, got to be very careful with a running back that's had tread on the tire, right? Injuries. When you're looking past 6 or 7 years of production and giving a longer-term contract, I hate to say because I love the player, but you know, Tiki, and I think Paul, you would agree, Tiki 04 to 06.
Unbelievable.
Was a much more productive player than Saquon because what he could do in the passing game is not even comparable. And the weird thing is Tiki developed like this contact balance from powerlifting late in his career. He was the total package.
Well, he ran up the mountains in Ramapo.
Yeah, he was the total package.
But
So
let's make no mistake about it. Saquon Barkley caught 91 passes as a rookie.
Yeah.
Tiki Barber never caught 91 passes in a season. So please do not diminish Barkley's ability in the passing game. That would be a sorry mistake.
No, I don't. But the thing is, you know, Tiki's pass catching was, I think, a bit more explosive. You got more explosive plays out of Tiki. But anyhow, I don't want to compare the two players. All I'm saying is it's a cautionary tale, and no one should assume that just because the player's no longer around that production automatically goes away, falls off the map.
Okay, that's fair.
That's fair enough. But, you know, at the same point, there's a lot of other factors that go into that, Hugo. You know, who are your lineman who's blocking for him, even who's your quarterback. There are tons of factors that go into place with that. And listen, I don't. They're not going to give Saquon a long-term contract. I would think of, if you're asking me, 2-3 years.
I think it could be 4 or 5 with voidables on the back end.
Yeah, okay, no.
You know what I mean?
I'm talking about the 2 and 3 up front. But that's the nature of business, especially with running backs. But yeah, I mean, can you say you can always get something? Sure, you can. But remember this: you're talking to a guy about a guy, and I'll tell you this, and I'm not taking it. I don't want it to be disparaging to Tiki. Saquon Barkley is far more loved in the Giants locker room.
Oh, I'm sure.
Right now
I'm
than
sure.
Tiki was when in his last year. I can guarantee.
No,
I can tell you that for a fact.
Let me get away from the intangibles, Hugo. Let me just give you pure facts. Let's just go right to the core of this thing. How many headache players do the Giants have on offense? Guys who, an offensive coordinator, stay up all night on Monday worrying about how are we going to contain those guys. They have 2. Daniel Jones and Saquon Barkley. That's the difference. That's the difference. Because the Giants, by the time you're talking about that other team, they had Plexico Burress. I know he wound up midway through the season doing what he did, okay? But the truth of the matter is, when you have other headache players, it can maybe, overshadow the fact that if you lose that guy, you might be able to replace a lot of numbers. But you still got to have headache players on that side of the ball. The Giants, if they were to let Barkley and or Jones get away, they're eliminating one of their 2 headache players. That would be a sorry mistake if they're going to try to compete in this division again.
Well, and that's part of my point, Paul, which is if by giving Barkley a contract, you have to forego potentially getting a different type of headache player, then I wouldn't be in favor of the contract. But if you can't, then to your point, you got to try to do what you can within reason to keep him on board.
Well, they're gonna keep him on board. I don't know if you heard at the top of the show.
I didn't.
Okay, I likened it and I tweeted it out today. I likened it, Hugo, to the situation going on with some of the numbers aside. It's still business. It's still business. It's the same situation. The minute the Yankee season ended, the very minute the Yankee season ended, to the second, all the talk till you got to the winter meetings was what's happening with Aaron Judge. Where's he going to go? Is he going to stay? Is he going to go? For how much? Bada beep, bada bop, bada boop. How much this? How much that? And where is he today? He's with the Yankees, and he's the captain of the Yankees. So you know what? The season ended, and the next day we were in the locker room. The questions ad nauseum were thrown at both Daniel and Saquon. And as I said, I respect people having to do their jobs, but after a while, it was enough, one after the other. And again, they're not going to tip their hands because the agents tell them, don't tip your hands. The same way Brian Daboll and Joe Schoen, Joe Schoen tipped his hand Monday by saying, we're happy with him, we want him back. He said he wants both guys back, but then people want to know for how much. Well, you're not going to be told that. That's the business.
Hugo, appreciate the call. The other
Thank
part
you.
to this, which don't play lip service to, I know some people will, but don't pay lip service to it. When Joe Schoen put a premium and came right out and said he puts a premium on retaining your own guys, because a lot of coaches will say that, GMs will say that, but this is an organization between Schoen and Daboll that proved their kind of guys are going to be the guys that help build this team into a winner. They put a very high premium on football intelligence and on getting the guys that they believe are good fits. They know that Barkley and Jones are good fits. There may be a more talented quarterback in this league. There may be a more talented running back in this league. But they know these 2 guys fit their team the best.
Smack on, nailed it right on the hammer right on the head there, Paul. And remember this: Joe Schoen and Brian Daboll came in, and Daniel Jones and Saquon Barkley weren't their guys. They not that they were for, nor were they against. They weren't their guys. They came in having to do their due diligence and ascertain, could these be the guys we move forward with?
That's right.
They had to make that decision
Yep.
with an open mind. They were not tied to it. If they didn't want those guys, they wouldn't have been here. If they didn't want those guys, changes would have been made. Changes would be made now. They knew after they got here and they ascertained the situation, we got ourselves a quarterback and we got the running back.
And you know what I love about that, Russ? There was so much made in the spring when Jones didn't get his option picked up, right? And people said, well, that's because he's not a Shane guy. He's not a Daboll guy. He's not a Shane guy. Right? Everybody said it. They didn't pick up his option, so that means he's going to be gone. It's a long shot for him to stick around. Well, if you really believe that, then what Daboll and Shane have said now all along, and especially emphasized the other day, okay, if you really believe that they weren't the right guys, well, they've now publicly, Shane and Daboll have publicly stated about how much they love these guys and want them, which, again, shows the dramatic belief that they have in both guys. There's nothing else needs to be said.
Listen.
Nothing else needs to be said.
Paul's right. There really is nothing else that needs to be said. But the reason we're saying it, because Hugo brought it up, and he was bringing up a fair point.
It's okay.
But
he brought up a fair point. But
it's going to be, you're going to be hearing this nonsense until they sign on the dotted line.
I got a deal to make with the BBKL folks out there. For all of you folks who listen and call, just do us a favor. Okay? Maybe you want to do it with other people around the program, but when I'm on this show, please let's not talk about Daniel Jones and Saquon Barkley being in limbo and not being Giants. Okay? The next time I talk about Barkley and Jones, we will talk about the contract that they signed and the fact that they are staying. Up until that point, there is no sense in wasting anybody's breath talking about Jones and Barkley.
I mean, there was a question that got brought up Monday with Joe Schoen. What was dinner like with Odell Beckham? What was dinner like with Odell Beckham? Okay,
I heard the waiter service was a little bit behind.
Yeah. What was dinner like?
Brilliant question.
And Shane,
brilliant.
Shane, to his credit, said it was good. and then, are you interested in him? Joe Schoen, like anybody else in this world, you never rule out anything. He's not going to tip his hand. For the upteenth time, I'm going to say that. But everybody, whoa, he was coming here. Oh, it was all set. Giants are in the driver's seat. This is what he wants. Come on. I mean, people are trying to make chicken salad out of chicken you-know-what.
People are obligated. They've got to write stories. And so if there's nothing there, they got to come up with something.
That was a good one, though.
Yeah. How was hysterical.
How was dinner?
It was hysterical.
How was dinner?
And by the way, just so you guys who didn't listen to the Shane presser with Daboll, Shane's message to everybody is that they'll look at all available options to improve the team. Just so you know, right, Russ?
No, but really, I think
okay.
When you want to talk about how guys are open-minded, they came in, they didn't have to be tied to the personnel at all. They made a decision. Looking, and I'll tell you what, I remember talking. I'll say it right now. I remember talking with Joe Schoen, prior to training camp. And, asking him, how long do you think it'll take you to know if Daniel's your guy? And I remember Joe saying, I think it'll be maybe 4 or 5 games. And it came up again on Monday, and he said, I don't know if there was an aha moment.
Right,
but,
he said he didn't have one.
But I remember that. My point being, well, they started off 6-1. Trust me, Joe Schoen knew and Daboll knew he was their guy. And all he did was reinforce it week in and week out. We kept saying this before the video came back. You were sitting here and I was sitting there. We kept saying it. All Daniel was doing was reinforcing his future here with the Giants.
All he needed to do was check the final box, and that was stay healthy for the season.
Bingo.
That's the only thing that was missing.
And let me say one other thing, Paul. In fairness to Hugo, he brought out a point. You know, you get a running back maybe with some treads. Let me tell you something about that running back with some treads. Yes, he went through his injury-plagued season. He through all that ugliness in Joe Judge's last year, especially the last 6 games when Daniel was out and they didn't have anything, the one positive, and you and I would talk about it sometimes, we were seeing more of Saquon kind of running with a little more power, a little more this, a little more that.
It's much more assertive.
Yeah, and he took it into this season. Looking at Saquon, you know, towards the end of the season, he looked a guy that was fresh, healthy, and ready to rock and roll. So to me, the treads are behind them. They're getting a guy in very, very good shape. 201-939-4513. Let's go to Bloomfield and check in with Bob. Hello, Bob. You're on with Russ and Paul.
Oh, hi, guys. I was a two-part question. I had spoke to you guys a while ago, and it was real informative of what Paul's answer was to me. And the question I had today, you know, it kind of showed in that playoff game. Like, I was concerned with 7 defensive backs and not being able to stop the run because of the size of the players, and Philly kind of ran through the Giants. So, you know, defensively, Paul really, the answer he gave me, I understood that was the talent the Giants had, and that's best package day. But it's very hard to win when you don't have true linebackers. The Giants were such known for that from the 70s, 60s. I've been watching them forever. And so my question was that, Paul, in free agency, right, I was just wondering what you thought. Do you think sometimes it's better to go get a guy like a linebacker? Maybe you don't get the 8 or 10 free agents that are kind of middle of the road or backups, and maybe pay a little money and solidify a position, bring in a really quality linebacker or maybe a defensive lineman, and because it's hard to win, as we found out in the playoffs, if you can't stop the run.
Yeah, I thought when the Giants brought in Blake Martinez a few years ago, and they spent some good money on him, excuse me, he came in and gave them something right away. He definitely lifted this defense and did a solid job until he got hurt, and then obviously everything fell apart for him. So I can understand that way to go. Many years ago, they signed Antonio Pierce when he was a free agent from Washington, and he was a Super Bowl champion for this team. So
and a leader. And
no question. So there are times when that's worked, okay? There's also times when you wait for your guys to kind of step up and be those guys. I would submit to you that Darian Beavers had a sensational August, and I've been saying since the day he got hurt that this guy was going to compete for a starting job. Joe Schoen admitted that just the other day, that they think he would have definitely competed for it. I think within a couple of weeks in, he would have been the starting middle linebacker. And I see a lot of Pepper Johnson in Darian Beavers. Now, can you say coming off a serious knee injury that cost him a season that he's guaranteed to be the stud and starter going into next year? You can't say that. If you put all your eggs in that basket, you're making a mistake. You have to be cautious. So it wouldn't surprise me if they signed a middle-of-the-road middle linebacker, or if they drafted one somewhat higher to supplement Beavers or compete with Beavers, because you can't just will him that starting job going into next July. But I would definitely tell you that he is going to be a significant part of that equation. Don't think they don't have anybody who can fill that spot.
You know what? I remember standing on the sidelines with you, Paul, watching Beavers, practices and everything, and we were like, huh?
He's a stud.
And I forgot what round. We're talking about sixth round.
It was a steal, absolute
from
steal.
Cincinnati. Let me tell you what. He was looking like everything. Like when he went down, it was like, oh, bleep. Because he really looked like he was going to be a contributor.
It was crushing when he got hurt. Now, I don't know if that's the answer you're looking for, But
Well,
if you're after the Giants to spend huge money to go get a middle linebacker, I don't think that's going to happen.
And Paul, the one more thing I know you guys just quickly in that fight, like when you watch the Giants, right? They have Thibodeau and Aziz Jalori, and it looks like a 5-man line. Is it like how come sometimes Martindale doesn't take like Dallas does with the linebacker they have? Why won't he take a Thibodeau and move him in the middle and blitz him from there? And is it because is it strictly like that type of defense where they play strictly that end position? Because I remember the 3-4 they ran in the 80s with Lawrence Taylor and them.
Right.
You know, they used to swing them into the middle. And like sometimes I wonder, why wasn't Thibodeau coming up the middle more?
Well, there were times that he would twist or stunt, and he would actually come into the A gap or come into the B gap on his rush move. But in terms of actually lining him up there pre-snap, they did not do that. You're right. That was not the preferred way to go. They wanted to keep Ojulari and Thibodeau out there on the edges. But they did not always take the same rush lane. Now, maybe that's because Wink has a preference to do it that way, thinking that we don't want to show you where he is, and he's got variable rush lanes to go through. That's very possible. When the Giants did it with Lawrence, they would line him up in all different spots because they thought that the pre-snap lineup of LT was enough of an intimidation and a confusion that it would cause the offense problems. I think that's just a philosophical difference. But don't mistake that Thibodeau rushed the same rush lane every time. He did do some stunting and twisting.
Yes, he did. But Bob, and did you hear? And you brought up LT yourself, like in the 80s.
Well,
and
LT's
Paul
a
just
different
said-
animal too. Let's not forget that.
Taking nothing away from anybody. Wink doesn't have LT. Nobody.
No.
The only people who had LT were the people who coached him here. That's it. There are no other LTs. Never were. Not to this day, no other LTs.
And I will say this to the caller also, Thibodeau's going to have to add more strength.
Yeah.
His power component as he comes back for his second season is going to have to be better. Ojulari had put on over 10 pounds of muscle in his second season, and he's going to have to continue to enhance his power quotient too.
Yeah, I agree with
you
that.
got to grow into the spot. The more you improve and grow into the spot, the more things a coordinator can do with you.
Thanks for the call, Bob. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
201-939-4513 is the number. Now let's go down to Charleston and check in with Roy. Hello, Roy. You're on with Russ and Paul.
Hi.
Russ, how are you?
Good. How you doing, Bob?
The Podfather, how are you, sir?
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Hey, really proud of our Giants. They just did a great job this year. You know, we had a lot of injuries, and a lot of these guys came up off of the practice squad and just excelled. They did really well. And one of the guys was asking about, you know, some of the linebackers. Who on the injury list do you think is going to be able to come back and start for us next year if they rehab well? And because then we don't have to worry about plugging those holes in with the draft
Right.
or maybe some free agents.
We
So,
mentioned Beavers
that-
already has a possibility
Yep.
of doing it. I would also say Izudu has a chance to compete as the starting left guard when he comes back next season. We already got to see him some this year, and I think he's very, very promising. McKeithen, they were very high on during training camp, the offensive lineman, who they think has the ability to play guard and tackle. So there's a guy who could possibly push at least to be a very strong backup, if nothing else. To me,
Right.
that's kind of where it starts. You expect to have more improvement out of Bellinger as he comes back for a full season. You expect Wan'Dale Robinson to be a much bigger part of the passing game as he comes back healthy.
Boy,
Right?
And he was really starting to come into it.
Look like it.
And then it just went down.
So I think those are the kinds of guys that you're talking about right away. I mean, you know, they were kind of like redshirt guys in a way because they really didn't get to show much this year.
Yep. Well,
Is there somebody else you had in mind?
No, I was. I was. You know, I got to be honest with you. I've lost track of them, and so.
Well, let me forget DJ Davidson, the defensive tackle. that they were able to draft last year, and he hurt his knee, I believe it was, or his Achilles. I can't remember which one it was, that landed him on IR for the season. They have very, very high hopes for him as a rotational defensive tackle. Very strong and powerful. They think they wanted to redshirt him this year. The idea wasn't going to be that he was going to play that much anyway. Turned out he got hurt and he couldn't. But they have a lot of hopes for DJ Davidson, and I think that will help because we saw, quite frankly, at the last end of this season, Leonard Williams, he was battling that stinger that went into his shoulder, and it did limit him somewhat, and Dexter Lawrence couldn't do it every single play all on his own. So they need some help there, and I think Davidson's going to be part of that mix.
You know, Roy, you just brought out a good point when you said you lost track. You weren't the only one who lost track. No, seriously. We all lost track. I had never been, and listen, there were plenty of injuries, during Joe Judge's 2 years here, and Sherman went through the injuries.
Sure.
But it was like it just seemed one after another. I've never watched a season with the Giants where the practice squad was so much involved with the season.
And
week in and week out.
I just got burned too. Yeah. I lost track. Don't forget about Cordell Flott.
Yeah.
Flott was out most of the season.
Flott.
And he can play.
Did so well this year. I'm so happy.
Yeah, now he's a little slight. Now that's the issue. His durability is going to be a concern because he's a bit slight.
Right.
Okay? He's going to have to put on some more sturdiness, if you will, if he's going to wind up being more of a full-time player. And the other guy who I praised all during the offseason finally made it back after he ripped up his knee last year was Rodarius Williams. I love this kid as a cover guy.
Yep.
The issue for him is that he's not as good in helping out in run support. And he's going to have to, if he wants to be a major cog in this secondary, he's going to have to get better at dealing with the run. All right? He's got cover skills. Yep. He can cover almost anybody in this league. I'm telling you. He's got speed. He's got the quicks. He's got the ball skills. He's got length. Rodarius Williams can play in this league as a boundary corner. But if you're not going to support the run as well as you need to, it's going to make coaches reluctant to keep you on the field.
Well, and thank you for bringing all the folks who my biggest point was is that we still have talent on this team that has not been proven. Because of the injuries, we've got talent, and that's really encouraging going into the next training.
Yes.
When we go into training camp next year, we can see once these guys heal, take care of themselves, how much more our team will get better, I believe.
And I forgot Ellison Smith.
Yeah,
how about that?
Yeah.
I forgot Ellison Smith.
I was just it was bothering me too. Yeah, Ellison Smith.
We're all confused. It just took me a little bit of time there to get the fogginess out of my head.
How about Shane Lemieux?
Shane Lemieux, another guy.
Oh my gosh, I forgot about Shane Lemieux.
Think of all of this raw talent that has never had the ability to be cultivated because of all the injuries that have gotten in the way.
Yep. And the last thing I was going to ask you guys
Matthew
is oh my gosh, yep.
I know.
No, but that's telling you what they just went through. That's more reason why Brian Daboll should be Coach of the Year. Go
now
ahead,
you
Roy.
understand why the arrow's pointing up, and this team has a nice 2 to 3 year window at least of where they can make some real hay.
That is so encouraging, I tell you, and to see where we were last year to this year, 9 and 8, plus a playoff game. Like you said, the arrow's pointing up. Now, my last question real quick is what players are going to have to be signed to keep them that will really continue this trend of this upward arrow? And I'll take it off the air. Guys, I love you. And what a great season. Thank you both for being there for a damn Yankee from Manhattan living in Charleston, South Carolina. Hey, Tim, we had a good season. God bless you guys. Thank you so much.
Thanks for the call.
Thank you, Roy. Appreciate it. Good off season.
Well, there's no doubt we've mentioned Barkley and Jones. Beyond that, I believe Julian Love is a mandatory re-sign.
Right.
After that, It could get sticky. Honestly, it could. Gates and Feliciano obviously played a lot on the offensive line this year. Both of them, their contracts are up. I don't know which one the Giants will prioritize. And quite honestly, okay, there's the Buffalo connection with Daboll and Bobby Johnson with Feliciano. I mean, they brought him down here pretty quick. So I think they probably want him back. Does that leave room for Nick Gates?
I
hope it does, but I don't know.
But you know what? I think right now that's an even battle. If they got to pick one or the other,
Price may come into play.
Yeah, if they have to pick one or the other, again, Price comes into play. Also, I think Nick Gates has proven to Daboll and Schoen the same way that Daniel Jones and Saquon proved.
Oh, I don't think there's any doubt.
He's a leader.
You want him on this team.
One of their guys. You
just don't know how the business end's going to work out. And again, what does Nick also want for himself too?
Yeah, and there are. I think Nick really likes it. Nick really, really likes it here. He rehabbed through everything this year. He proved he could come back. He gets it. He understands the business. And listen, there are other questions. I mean, you're going to take care of.
Well, the three guys we said. Other after that, it becomes a little less concrete. For example, Darius Slayton. Darius Slayton, I like him a lot.
Right.
He's a great guy. He gives you everything he's got. He wasn't quite as consistent as you want a big-time threat to be. Well, so, Darius Slayton, to me, I'm not sure.
No, I'm not sure.
That he's in concrete.
But in fairness to Darius was pushed into, at one point,
oblivion.
But from oblivion, then he was the number one guy. Mm-hmm. This was before Isaiah Hodgins stepped up and this and that. He was the number one guy, and he was out there on an island by himself. And he took a pay cut to stay here. So you see how that works out.
He may want to move on. Who knows?
We have to find out what's going on. Listen, they're gonna have to be taken care of soon. Dexter Lawrence.
Well, they have another year with him, so they could
Thomas,
sit tight if they wanted to.
Also with Leonard Williams. I think
Leonard will be redone.
Yeah,
he's already said he's up for it.
People were asking him, what are you going to do? It's business. I no longer been through this, not just in football, in all sports. We've been through it, guys like Paul and myself, we've been through it too much. And the same thing happens every time. Is this guy going to stay? Is that guy going to go? That's what negotiations are about. That's what negotiations are about. It's not like monopoly money. It's real money. And when you're dealing with real money, things get a little touchy. Not even touchy like nervous. It's just, that's business. You don't just automatically say, here, it's a done deal.
Russ, part of the problem here is that there are some guys on the lower end of the salary spectrum who you probably would like to keep, but because you do have to take care of your virtual mandatories in Jones, Barkley, and Love, there will be some of those guys on the other side that you're not going to be able to keep.
Right.
That's just the nature of the business. I mean, there's only so many bucks to go around. And, the Giants are going to try to manage it as best as they can. I will tell you this, and I leave you with this thought. When Joe Schoen was in Buffalo, the Bills were masterful at manipulating the cap with different types of bonuses and different type of contract triggers that allowed them to do a lot more than people would think because of how they were able to manipulate the numbers. That organization was masterful at manipulating the numbers. And I'm sure that Joe Schoen has brought a lot of that knowledge with him to the Giants. So I expect them to do a lot of manipulation better than most teams do because he's learned from the Buffalo model.
And that, folks, is really a wrap here. Some thank yous to go around. Pearson Butler, our producer man at the controls. Great job, Pearson, as always. To my good friend sitting to my left, Paulie Dots, Paul Dottino. My friend, it is always a pleasure. Have a great time with you. The only thing that sucks for me is the off season because I want it to be in the season all the time. And, of course, you, the fans out there, because without you, Big Blue fans out there, Big Blue Kickoff here would be nothing. We need you people to be talking to. So again, to everybody, it's been a great ride for me. I can't wait to be back talking with you next season. Be well, everybody. Have a good one.